But what about Jesus in the early church? I mean, if some guy showed up, taught all the stuff that he taught, made the social waves that he made, performed public signs and wonders all over the place that everybody saw, then got executed by the state, then 3 days later came back from the dead, then showed up in front of a whole bunch of people and had meals with them and hung out with them until he eventually ascended into the sky, witnessed by people who were in agreement that that happened. And then a little bit after that, the Holy Spirit shows up, and all of a sudden Jesus' followers can speak languages they don't speak, and then they start healing people, and dead people are coming back to life, and this church goes from a group of about 120 people to a group of thousands and thousands and thousands of people that eventually becomes such a big deal that Rome decides it needs to try to suppress this movement, and eventually they realize they can't suppress the movement, and people in leadership come to participate in the movement, and at that point, Christianity becomes the dominant, even official religion of the Roman state. That's a really big shift in history. You would think that if all that stuff happened, there'd be some kind of documentation.
Yeah. If some guy showed up, did all of that stuff, was magical and everything, we should expect to have a lot of documentation. But we don't. And with the idea that the religion grew so quickly, we should definitely find more documentation than we actually do. We don't have any more documentation, really, than just Paul. Paul is our earliest source writing in the 50s, and then the Gospels come about 40 years after Jesus supposedly died in the 70s. And the Gospels are where eyewitness accounts first pop up, 40 years after he supposedly died, which is when anybody that could have been an eyewitness would have been dying off. Our earliest source, being Paul, doesn't record any eyewitnesses whatsoever. The best that you could pin on Paul is these post-resurrection appearances. Even then, those are most likely hallucinations. Visions are not first-hand eyewitness accounts. So, just to recap, the first version of Christianity that Paul was pushing in his day had no earthly ministry, no eyewitnesses, no disciples, no miracles. Just visions and a late-night reading of the scriptures.
Recently in my travels on the internets, I've come across some remarks or comments or articles that try to argue that there was no external corroboration of the events described in the New Testament.
Probably because there isn't?
And that's just not accurate.
Now, it's important to know the time frame and what documents we're actually talking about here. What we're talking about is the Gospels and Paul. There's nothing outside of the Paul in the Gospels and the other parts of the New Testament that corroborate what Paul and the Gospels say. You see, the Gospels were written a lifetime later and were already established in the Christian theology that was going around at the time. You see, people already had to believe in this euhemerization of Jesus for them to write it down. You see, there can't be any corroborative sources for the Gospels that haven't already been affected by the Christian theology contained in the Gospels.